he wasn't telling us whether we were reserve or career astronauts. We were actually only told on the day itself, before the announcement, but on the day itself. But yeah, that was really a very exciting moment.
My name is Meganne Christian, and I'm a member of the European Space Agency Astronaut Reserve, previously a researcher at the National Research Council of Italy, and now I'm working with the UK Space Agency as Reserve Astronaut and Exploration Commercialization Lead.
I had so many different ideas of what I wanted to do when I was young. For a while I wanted to be an actor or an architect, certainly an astronaut when I was when I was studying all that space stuff. I think when I really got into starting to decide about my career and we did work experience at school, I did work experience at a university for marine biology because I was really fascinated by that, and I had a scuba diving license, and so I was thinking of doing marine biology. But then I guess from there I kind of moved away from biology into more maths and chemistry side of things. And I guess kind of at the end of school I decided to do engineering. But it's always been in continuous development throughout my whole career. It's not like the subjects that you choose are going to trap you forever. So yeah, I've kind of taken opportunities as they've come up along the way. It was a big challenge. It was really a big challenge, especially because we had so many applicants. So we had 22,500 people apply. And so I think it was a challenge for the selection committee as well, because just getting through all those applications, reading all the CVs and motivation letters would have been a huge enterprise, basically. And the selection group wasn't huge. So they had a lot to get through. And so from the CV and motivation letter, as well as a questionnaire that we filled out, they cut it down to about 1,400 people who then went on to the next round. And that was a set of tests in Hamburg at DLR on computer-based testing, a bit like what pilots do to join a commercial airline. And they were things like maths and physics, also logic and memory, working with a joystick. And there were some very, very difficult tests there. We did get a preview a couple of weeks beforehand, so we could practice a little bit. And I did do a lot of practice, and I could see that I was improving over time. So that was the first difficult part. I think that was a scary part because you sort of knew what was coming and you knew that it was difficult. But then from then on, you didn't really know what was coming. So from there, they took about 400 people to the psychological round. And in the psychological round, we had some group activities, group exercises. We had an exercise in a pair as well, all about communication and teamwork. And then a lot of questionnaires about, basically psychological questionnaires about how we think, how we would react in certain situations. And then there was a one-on-one interview with a psychologist and also a panel interview. So that was the third stage. From there, they cut it down to about 100 people who did a whole week of medical testing. And this one was, I guess, kind of the most relaxing one in a way, because if they find something wrong with your body, there's a consolation prize is that you know that's there. So you get this very, very thorough medical testing, which is great. But yeah, really, aside from exercising beforehand, there's not a lot that you could do. So in a way, that was relaxing. It was quite fun, apart from certain tests, but it was fun because we were in a small group of people and we got to know them really well over the course of a week. And then from there, they took 50 people to a panel interview. And the panel interview, I think, was my most challenging point. Like after all of the stages, I really wasn't sure whether I was going to get through to the next stage. But this one, I was particularly unsure. And it was really wide-ranging as well. And they made sure that they were hard-hitting questions. And if they could see that you were getting into your comfort zone, then they would take you out of it immediately. So it was designed to be tough. But also, again, looking back on that as a challenge, I think about it and I'm like, yeah, I actually enjoyed that. And then the final round was about 25 people with an interview with the Director General of the European Space Agency. And you'd think that'd be intimidating, but actually it was reasonably relaxed. It was just kind of getting to know each other. And then he made the final decision. It was a long process. It was about 18 months. And mine was one of the last CVs that they got to. So I was waiting about 6 months before I heard anything about whether I'd been invited to the next round or not. And then I was always in the last group, very last group of people going through. So, yeah. So I was riding home from work one day. I was on my bike, and I felt my watch vibrating. So I knew there was a phone call coming in, and I wasn't going to stop, but I had a quick look down, and I saw that it was a French number. Like, okay, I'd better answer this call because the headquarters of the European Space Agency is in France, in Paris. And so I stopped my bike, answered the phone, and it was the Director General. And he said he would like to invite me to Paris for the announcement. They hadn't told us yet. He wasn't telling us whether we were reserve or career astronauts. We were actually only told on the day itself, before the announcement, but on the day itself. But yeah, that was really a very exciting moment. So as a reserve astronaut, we continue with our normal jobs. So the way ESA works is that they like to keep up their record of everybody who trains goes to space. And at the moment they have 5 flights available. So they're training 5 career astronauts. And so the rest of the reserve, we're just waiting to see, except for Marcus Want, who's the Swedish reserve astronaut. He's already been assigned a mission with Axiom, so he's gone to Houston. He's started his training, so that's very exciting, and that's probably an opportunity that many of the reserves will have. So we've had a lot of briefings about what happened, about how ESA works, their different programs, but we're not training yet. That's an interesting question, because I think when I was a kid, I was definitely absolutely fascinated by space. When I was about in year 5, we were studying black holes and the planets, and I just thought they were amazing. I loved all my space books that I had. I have this memory of an astronaut coming to visit my school. So yeah, I was absolutely inspired by that. And when I was a bit older, about 15 years old, I got to go to the US, and I went to the Kennedy Space Center, and I went to the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, and yeah, so like I said, it's always been inspiring, but I actually grew up in Australia. So I was born in the UK, but I grew up in Australia. And the space agency there now is only 5 years old. So when I was growing up, it wasn't around at all, let alone the idea of human space flight. So it didn't really cross my mind as a career path. So I went off and did engineering, chemistry, and I think during the course of my career, I kind of moved more towards space projects and space adjacent projects. So I guess, no, it hasn't been always my plan to move into the space industry, but the more I get closer to it, the more I want to. Yeah, so I spent a whole year in Antarctica. I actually went back again a couple of years later. But yeah, so the first time I went there was for this winter over, but you have to arrive in the summer, so you can do a handover with the previous winter over crew, and then at the end you do the same. So it ends up being a whole year instead of the winter season, which is 9 months. So I was at Concordia Station, which is in the middle of Antarctica. It's an international base in the sense that it's French and Italian. And also the European Space Agency sends a research doctor there to do experiments on us, because it's kind of like an analog mission. It's also called White Mars. It's very much like going on a long-term space mission, also because of the fact that it's at altitude, so there's an oxygen deficiency, and the isolation and the small crew. So yeah, so I was doing climate change research across a lot of different areas, completely different to any kind of research that I'd done before. This was natural sciences, where I was used to doing very applied sciences. Yeah, but it was really exciting. It was hard, 100 days of darkness. We got to minus 104 degrees Celsius, so it was hard, but it was also, I felt privileged to be there. absolutely privileged. And then I got to go back because it was actually in the middle of the pandemic and they wanted a really reduced crew for the summer season. And so they were looking for people who could cover multiple projects, which is what the winter over crew have to do. And so I got the opportunity to go back again for a summer season, and that was just a lot of fun. So that opportunity came up because I was working at the National Research Council of Italy, and they have a number of permanent observatories there at Concordia Station from various research institutes. And so they look for somebody every year to go and be the winter over scientist. And the first time this came up, this email came around, I'm like, oh, I would really love to go there, but I'm not qualified for it. I don't have the right kind of background. But then it came up again the next year, and I said, you know what, I might just send them an email. And so I sent them an email, and I sort of said, well, would you welcome an application from somebody with my background? And they said, sure, come and have a chat. Turned out that chat was an interview. And then I was selected in the end, so yeah. Yeah, I think it's really helpful because space is international. And so on a space mission, you'll have people from many different countries, and just having that understanding of how different cultures interact and how, just different traditions and that kind of thing. I think it's really important to have that cultural awareness because really the most important thing that an astronaut has to do is get along with their teammates. I think that started a beautiful tradition. So Helen took that to space, and she herself got all her crewmates to sign it. And then she passed it on to Tim Peake, who took it to space as well and got all his crewmates to sign it. And so I think that is just a beautiful way of having a tradition of British astronauts. Yeah, I think it's the way of thinking that you get from doing research, from doing engineering and science in general. It's a very methodical and systematic. You learn a lot of problem solving, and so I think that kind of way of thinking certainly helps in the kind of vein that you need for an astronaut. And at the moment, the European Space Agency recruits astronauts from STEM backgrounds or pilots as well. So I think in the future that might be different. For example, the Japanese Space Agency has opened up to people with an arts major as well, because there are a whole lot of new things that we're going to need for space missions in the future. But for now, you have to have a kind of science, engineering, medicine, pilot background. And so just fundamentally, that helped too. I never had one particular role model. I think rather than have, these famous people that I looked up to, I really looked up to the people that I knew, people that I'd met, people around me. So I definitely looked up to my mom and my sisters. I have 4 sisters. I kind of followed in my dad's footsteps because he was an industrial chemist. He's retired now, but he was an industrial chemist. So I didn't mean to follow in his footsteps, but that's kind of what happened. So yeah, I definitely looked up to the people that were around me. Also, lots of teachers at school, and yeah. Yeah, I'd like to just show that you don't have to decide when you're 3 years old to become an astronaut and commit your entire life to that. And in fact, I wouldn't encourage that because so few people get to be astronauts, but there are many, many other fulfilling careers that you can do along the way. So I'd just like to show people that anything can happen. And it's just, the best thing is to have a lot of fun, work hard, but enjoy what you're doing. I think it's absolutely hugely important, and I enjoy it. I really love, I give some presentations now and then, and I love the questions that I get afterwards because they're always varied, and it really shows the interest that especially young people have. So I think inspiring is important, and it's also a lot of fun. I think actually that the strangest question I got in that kind of vein was not a real question. So it was a question that came up in one of my interviews during the selection process. So I had to pretend that the panel was a young child of about 9 years old who had just seen a video of the Challenger disaster. And so they would ask me, why would you go to space if you know you might not come back? So that question definitely made me think a lot. It's a very challenging one to answer. I don't think I answered very well to that question, but thinking back on it, I've thought about it a lot. I think you really have to connect it with experiences that children might have. And so examples, for example, they see something that they want to learn about up high in a tree, and they know that they could fall out of the tree if they go up and look at this thing, but they do it anyway. And this is kind of about, yes, we know those risks are there, but we're very, very well prepared for it. And the rewards for not just ourselves, but also for general human understanding are greater than the risks, which have been minimized by all the people that have put their life's work into making this happen. Well, one of them is sitting here, this penguin here. This would be my my zero gravity indicator, and she has played that role before. This is Pengaroo. She's a penguin that I knitted. Long story, mammalian penguin, because my husband thinks that penguins deserve to be mammals. So she has a little pouch with a baby penguin. But she has traveled all around the world. She's been to Antarctica, and hopefully one day she'll go to space. But she has been on some parabolic flights. So she has played the role of zero gravity indicator in the past, and I hope she will get to in the future as well. I think I would miss, well, the people, family and friends, but also probably the smells of Earth. And I have the experience of that, again, from Antarctica, because I didn't realize, but then when I came back and they opened the door, it was a sort of cargo plane, so they opened the back door of the plane like this, and just suddenly there was this whoosh of smells of the cut grass and the sea and that kind of thing. So that was amazing. So I think I would probably miss those kinds of sensations. The base itself didn't smell great because like on the ISS, a lot of the wastewater is recycled. And it's not the smell of the wastewater itself that is bad, it's the smell of the resins when they're working really hard. So when they haven't been changed, then the smell gets a bit not great. But Antarctica itself, when you go outside, I'm going to say that it doesn't smell like anything much because it's basically all water. And also where I was in sort of the middle of Antarctica, and there are no animals even. But also I don't think you'd actually be able to smell anything because your noses would be frozen. Well, certainly in summer especially, because during the summer season there are up to sort of 80, 90 people in the base, and the base isn't that big. It's not tiny, but it's not that big. So yeah, during that season it does tend to smell of a lot of people. During the winter there were only sort of 12 to 14 people. So it's quite easy to find your own space. Oh, Apollo 11. I don't think you can go past that. Yeah, being the first person on the moon would be amazing. But I think just going to the moon in general, so any of the Artemis missions in the future, that would be incredible. If you want to become an astronaut, just don't plan your life around that, because that's actually not going to help you in the selection process. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be doing the things that you love. So I would suggest do the things that you love, because they're the things that you'll be best at. and you can show that you work hard and that you enjoy life, and I think that actually comes across more in the selection process rather than ticking a lot of boxes. So that's what I would suggest. And at the moment, the chances of becoming an astronaut are low, unfortunately, and I feel lucky. I think there has been a level of luck involved. So I think if you kind of do the things that you love to do also around the aerospace industry in general, then you're going to have a fulfilled life, whether you get the bonus of being an astronaut or not. And I think along the pathway, you should just look out for little opportunities that might not be on your traditional career path. Like going to Antarctica in my case, for example, because they really broaden your perspective. They give you a new kind of perspective on life, and that helps you not only in some selections process, but also just in the way of looking at problems that you may need to solve in the future. Oh, there are so many different ways. I mean, just look out for any jobs. I mean, there are so many jobs here in the UK in the space industry. If you want to have a little bit of experience overseas and then maybe come back, the European Space Agency has many jobs as well. So just have a look, and you'll notice that they're not all for engineers and scientists. There are people from every kind of background, and we were talking about before how communication is so important. So there are a lot of comms roles as well, and basically anything you can think of, you can find a job in the space industry as well. I think it's been really exciting to be at this festival. I think it's really important to showcase what the UK is doing in space, because it's a lot more than people might expect. And so I think it's just been a really wonderful day. It's also seeing the children just get inspired, and maybe they'll follow a similar career or something completely different, and they might end up in the space industry, and that's really exciting to see. And I think it's a really important part of my job.